Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Wake up, well I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well I know I'm gonna...
Well, for the first time in the 2024 college football season, Oklahoma enters into college football Saturday as an unranked team. Waiting for the Sooners is going to be unranked South Carolina, who comes to Norman. And really, I think what we're going to describe as a must-win game for Oklahoma. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sooner Nation podcast. I'm Matt, along with Caleb. First ever meeting between the Sooners and the Gamecocks, Caleb. And one of the storylines here is the welcoming back of Shane Beamer, served as an assistant coach for Oklahoma, working on tight ends and H-backs. What was it, from 2018 to 2020, overseeing 3 Big 12 championship teams. And they made the college football playoff in 2018 and 2019. So the Oklahoma achieved quite a bit of success with Shane Beamer on the sideline in the assistant coach role. Now he comes back as a head coach for the South Carolina Gamecocks. On a scale of 0 to 10, what should the concern level be for an upset from Beamer and the Gamecocks on Saturday?
You know, I honestly don't know. I say about a 5.
Okay, so mild, but not extreme.
Because
South Carolina 3-3 overall in the SEC. I don't know, man. Go ahead. Keep going.
I mean, South Carolina is. We talk about our season being a roller coaster.
Uh-huh.
Their season is an absolute roller coaster. You look at their first game, they squeak out a home win against Old Dominion, 23-19.
Yeah.
Next week, they go out and blow the doors off Kentucky, and we saw Kentucky the next couple weeks lose to Georgia by 1 point and then go beat Ole Miss. Then there was a 3-point loss to LSU. They just blow out Akron. They get blown out by Ole Miss, and then they lose to Alabama by 2 on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So this South Carolina team's kind of all over the place. You really don't know what you're going to get. And for me, that's what's kind of scary because you don't know what you're going to get from Oklahoma. You know, we've seen this offense look terrible, and we've seen this offense look okay. Which offense are we going to get? And what South Carolina are you going to get? And that's why I have it as a 5, because you really just don't. I don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen Saturday.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is South Carolina has lost 3 of their last 4 games. The one win in that stretch was Akron that you mentioned, 50-7 was that win. But you know they lost LSU at home, they lost Ole Miss at home, they lost to Alabama at home, and now they're going on the road. Sorry, that was at Alabama, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So they lost to LSU at home, they lost to Ole Miss at home, they lost at Alabama last week, and now they're on the road again at Oklahoma. You look at Oklahoma, one of the things that we talked about with that Texas game was at what point, teetering in here, at what point does the defensive unit just kind of surrender because the offense is so inept? And I think you kind of have the same thing going with South Carolina. Their season is teetering. you look at Oklahoma, winners of 3 of their last 5. You look at South Carolina, losers in 3 of their last 5. These two programs are close. Both are teetering, but I kind of feel like there's more of a slant towards the negative with South Carolina than there is for Oklahoma, which kind of makes you think that if the Sooners can get some things rolling early in this game, be it on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball, or preferably both sides of the ball, if they can get some momentum going their way early, kind of like what you said with Auburn when the Oklahoma played on the road there, they can get South Carolina in their own heads, so to speak, and that gloom and doom mentality comes in and maybe have a stronger mental advantage. If Oklahoma's crowd can stay behind them, the defense can make some big plays, and the offense can find a way to squeak out some points in that first quarter, I think you can get this team on the ropes really fast.
But I completely agree with you, but I just have zero faith in our offense to be able to do that. They have not shown anything to prove that they can move the ball. And so it's a lot of, kind of going back to what we talked about in this OU Texas game is, what can the offense do? And I get South Carolina's not as good as Texas, but you had 2 weeks to prepare for Texas for 3 points.
Right.
And we got the injury report and this afternoon, and it's pretty much the same. You have Deion Burks is questionable. If he can make it a go, I think that helps a little bit. Brent Venables said, I think yesterday, that he's practicing at 80%. So, which is better because this time last week he hadn't practiced yet.
Right.
So it gives me a little bit more hope to see him out there. But I mean, I just feel like for me, I don't have a lot of faith in this offense to go into this game. But what I do have a lot of faith is in the defense. And, we talked Sunday night about, they have to stay checked in. And from Danny Stutzman, they said that they had a players meeting just for that. That a players only meeting, like, hey, we have to stay locked in. We're not 2-4, we're 4-2. The season's still right in front of us. And so that kind of gives me a little bit more confidence that, this defense knows they have to be good. So maybe they can play at even a higher level to kind of get us through this offensive woe. But this little faith in the offense right now for me.
You mentioned the injury report, and obviously, it changes. There'll be another one that comes out on Friday, it seems like, because we talked about Deion Burks last week in our pregame podcast, how he was vital, how, he was questionable and you got to have him. And then Thursday night or Friday, the second injury report came out and he was listed as out. But you're right. It is good news to see him as questionable. You got your typical cast of characters that are out: Jaden Gibson, Jalil Farouk, Nick Anderson, Andrell Anthony, Gentry Williams, Kendall Dolby, Gary Hatchett. They're all out. Questionable is Deion Burks, Cade McIntyre, Sam Franklin, and David Stone. So I don't really put a lot of faith in this early report anymore. I kind of wait for the later one to come out that lets you know a little bit more what you're looking at. But Caleb, you made a great point in the fact that this time last week, Burks had not been practicing, but he is practicing as of now. And so you just kind of hope for the best with that. And I do believe he adds, everything we said before Texas still applies. He adds another element to this offense that they desperately need. And I don't want to jump back into the, he said, she said, this is the problem. That's the problem. Over here's the problem when it comes to this Oklahoma offense. I think we've been down that road so many times that there's not one solution to fixing the offense. But if there was something as simple as one thing that could fix it, it would be like having a guy like Deion Burks back, because he's a playmaker you have on the offensive side of the ball. But the reality is, even with Deion Burks coming back, there's still going to be struggles with this offense. I look at this game, and you said it, they're 4-2, not 2-4. But when you look at this game, Oklahoma, I saw a stat earlier and I thought it was kind of cool, because these are the things that I look at as the stat nerd that I am. But since the start of the 1999 season, the Sooners are 24-1 in their games that immediately followed the Texas game. The one defeat came in 2014. They lost by 1 point to Kansas State in Norman. And the 24 wins that they have during that stretch, Oklahoma has outscored its opponents 589 points in total. So that means they're averaging a 24.5 point win in the week immediately following Oklahoma and Texas. And so history kind of seems to be on the side of Oklahoma. It's going to come down to me the normal cast of characters. It's going to come down to capitalizing on turnovers, making the big plays, and protecting the football. Those are the things that's going to determine the outcome of this game. Unfortunately, two of the three really depend on the defense. I mean, on the offense.
Yeah, and I mean, since I understand that we had two lost fumbles Saturday against Texas, but really since I almost said Dylan Gabriel, but Jackson Arnold's been sidelined, the offense has been taking care of the ball a lot better. Again, I know we had two fumbles against Texas, but the ball has been protected better,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of gives me hope. And both those guys that lost the fumble are both guys that like film and like to improve. I'm not saying that neither Hawkins or Taylor Tatum is going to turn the ball over ever again as the time here in Oklahoma.
Right.
That's going to happen. That's part of the game. But I don't expect that to be a regularity for those two. And I do like this defensive matchup against the South Carolina offense. South Carolina's offense has looked explosive at times, but has also looked more stagnant than the rest of the times. And I feel like, this is kind of a perfect offense for this defense to really kind of be able to flex and show their dominance. They do got playmakers, but Oklahoma has more playmakers on their defense.
Yeah, turnover margin, Oklahoma ranks seventh nationally in turnovers gained with 14 and 11th in the nation in the turnover margin at that plus 1.2. Now, Texas game kind of hurt them a little bit, but they still lead the SEC in both categories. And they're playing South Carolina that ranks 115th with 12 turnovers lost, and they're 68th in turnover margin. They're even. They're not plus, they're not minus, they're right at zero. So that's going to be a telling part of this story. And we'll get into more specifics, what you said offensively and defensively. I have some thoughts on that I'll save for later on in the podcast. But I want to talk for just a little bit about how big this game is for Oklahoma, because the Sooners are either going to be 5-2 following Saturday's game, or they're going to be 4-3. And there's almost an eternity's worth of difference between 5-2 and 4-3, right? I mean, you're really talking about one game in total, but that one game, that 2 in the loss column and 5 in the win column looks so much better than 4 in the win column and 3 in the loss column, right?
Yeah, and not only that, but a 5-2, you still control your own destiny. You still have what is it? Do quick maths, 5 games left.
Mm-hmm.
You still have plenty of opportunity to not just hit that going bowling, but to hit the mark to where you're going to be above 500.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if you lose this game, you're 4-3. Now that bowl game is a little further away.
Mm-hmm.
You look at this schedule, it's only going to get harder. And you got to carry some momentum. You got to get momentum going. And going 4-3 on the road to Ole Miss, that's just going to be even more of an uphill battle than it already is. But you go to Ole Miss 5-2, I feel like you're kind of feeling a little bit different about yourself if you on this Sooner football team.
Yeah, I think you look at the next three games: South Carolina at home, Ole Miss on the road, and then Maine in Norman. This next stretch is pretty brutal for Oklahoma, and not vital for Oklahoma, because those last three games of the schedule, that's really a kind of, to me, that's where it gets brutal, because you're going to Missouri, your one home game, the final home game of the season is against Alabama, and then you end the season at LSU. So then, to me, the next three games are the most winnable games on Oklahoma's schedule. And I get what I'm saying. At what is that, number 16, Ole Miss? That's still, I look at that as being a more winnable game than Columbia, Missouri, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I know Alabama has had its struggles, but man, if you can, what you're saying is, if you can get on a roll, even if you lose at Ole Miss, if you can get on a roll and get to the sixth win at Maine, those last three games kind of, sixth win relieves that pressure of bowl eligibility. And then those last three games, you can start looking at bowl placement and improving your bowl placement. You get to 6 wins, that bowl game could put you over 500. But if you don't get to 6 wins, it is gloom and doom. It is, but you've got people wanting to fire Oklahoma head coaches and assistant coaches and so forth right now. But you look at the two losses that the Sooners have endured this season. Number one team in the country, Texas Longhorns, and Tennessee was what, number 6 when they came in and beat Oklahoma in Norman. So your two losses are to top 6 teams in the country. You lose to South Carolina, you lose to an unranked team. It's not going to do anything to foster any confidence in this coaching staff. In fact, they can still beat South Carolina, and I promise you, they can win on Saturday, and you're still going to have people Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening saying, fire Seth Luttrell, fire Joe John Finley, fire this guy, fire that guy. It's not going to, beating South Carolina is not going to quiet the critics en masse, but certainly losing to South Carolina is going to pile on with more critics coming in and talking about the coaching staff. I fully believe, Caleb, I fully believe this with every fiber of my being. There's zero chance that any coach is getting fired before this season ends. If you're expecting Seth Luttrell to step away from play calling duties, not happening. If you're expecting Brent Venables to remove Seth Luttrell from play calling duties, not happening. It's not happening until after that LSU game. The earliest this is ever going to happen is after the LSU game. That's the earliest. And so Oklahoma fans need to get ready for what's going to happen over the last 6 weeks of the season. But winning on Saturday makes it a little bit more bearable. Losing on Saturday, there may be angry mobs with pitchforks and torches.
Yeah, and I kind of agree and disagree with you. I don't think anyone's going anywhere as of now. But you look at this next 3 game stretch, and if you go 1-2, and that one win being against Maine, I do kind of see a possible firing. But I don't think it's gonna come before. I think Missouri or Alabama is the earliest we could possibly see someone being let go. It's not gonna happen. Obviously, a lot of people wanted it after last week. That didn't happen. And I was on the get rid of Seth Luttrell now, but your points made were very valid on our Sunday podcast. No
Oh,
one on
comment wise on our website, people were with you more than they were with me. So I'm happy to hear you say that.
no one on this offense has done a good enough job to, for me, firing Seth Luttrell right now. Is it the right call? I 100% believe so. Does it make a change? I don't think so. I think back to when uh Mike Stoops got fired.
Mm-hmm.
Did it need to happen? Probably. Did the defense get better after he was fired? No.
Right.
So I understand if you want to let Seth Luttrell go, end of the season is probably best. And honestly, even if you do something spectacular and you end the season 10-2, I I still see people calling for his job. But I feel like the realistic number is a 7-5 season. And I still even expect for a 7-5 season. I do not expect Seth Luttrell. What I'm trying to say is, I do not expect Seth Luttrell to be the offensive coordinator this time next year. And that's just what Sooner fans are going to have to live with. It's going to happen during the offseason. It might not happen during the offseason. I hope it happens. But as of right now, no one's going to get fired. And Brent Venables has already said that.
Well, it's not that no one's going to get fired. No one's going to get fired during the season.
That's what I meant. That's what I
Yeah.
meant. No one's getting fired right now. Now this
Right.
offseason might be like a no one's safe type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, no one's going anywhere in Norman.
No, I think you said it best. I can't add to that other than to say, it's going to get bad. If Oklahoma loses this game, they're 4-3 getting ready for Ole Miss. It's going to get bad, but I think this is a winnable game for the Sooners. I look at South Carolina and I see that they mirror Oklahoma a lot. Now Oklahoma's 1-2 in conference play. South Carolina 1-3. The Sooners 4-2 on the season. The Gamecocks 3-3 on the season. But the difference is this game's in Norman. I would be much more apprehensive and worried about this game if it were in Columbia, but it's not. So do you feel like there's a level of confidence for this being a home game for the Sooners? I mean, I still kind of thought Oklahoma was going to win at Auburn, and Auburn's sitting 0-3 in the conference. It's a little bit worse than South Carolina in many aspects, but not much. But do you see what I'm saying? Like just being in Norman should give you confidence. And I'm hoping that the crowd, I mean, it's 11:45 kickoff, so hopefully that crowd will be ready. But all right, I mean, it's gotta make a difference being in Norman.
Yeah, 100%. And also, is this the first time we've done a whiteout in Norman?
I don't know, but my thing is, I think especially whiteouts, they're much better for night games.
I I completely agree. And also, I haven't seen anything about the Sooners wearing white uniforms. And I feel like if you're gonna do a whiteout, you have to wear white also where you're playing. And I'm trying to, because I have white OU shirts I've ordered, but I can't remember that was for a whiteout game or for a striped stadium.
Yeah, I don't really get into that. When I was there and I had my season tickets, and I would always pay attention when they striped the stadium. And that's really the only time I ever paid attention to that stuff, like whiteouts or whatever. I didn't really I can't I can think of multiple striped stadiums. I really can't think of a whiteout. And I don't know if we've done it. There's some millennial out there screaming at me because that stuff's not important to me. What happens on the field is what's important to me. And so I honestly can't remember, but the truth is I really don't care either. There's grumpy old Matt right there. This is the Sooner Nation podcast. We're glad that you're with us. We need to talk offense and defense for the Sooners coming up with the South Carolina game. Caleb's going to give the over-under this week. I'm going to tell him whether it's over or whether it's under. We also have the SEC rundown. There's some good games this weekend within the conference. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be right back. Oklahoma plays South Carolina this Saturday in Norman, 11:45 a.m. kickoff. I think the big question everybody looks at for the Sooners, Caleb, after the Texas game, the question is, how do you move the ball? Like what
But
needs to happen, right?
before we jump into that, I answered my own question. OU has had one whiteout. That was in 2019 at the season opener against Houston.
Dang, I was at that game too. So that just, I mean, hey, I did say grumpy old Matt. And so I guess I'm old enough now that I don't remember that stuff. Do you know what's crazy? Since we're just chasing rabbits here for just a quick second. Do you know
What's crazy?
That Texas A&M right now is the number one team, not ranked wise, but record-wise, Texas A&M's 3-0. They're the only team in the SEC with the 3-0 record.
Hmm.
I mean, you got three undefeated teams: LSU, Texas, and Texas A&M. But LSU and Texas are 2-0, and A&M is 3-0. Raise your hand if you saw that coming going into the third weekend in October.
Not just A&M, but also LSU. I kind of harped on LSU having a
Right,
down year,
right.
and they're proving me wrong at number 8 team in the country.
Yeah. So, how does Oklahoma move the ball against South Carolina? I think the first thing that the Sooners have going for them is that South Carolina is not Texas. The Gamecocks giving up 23.5 points per game. That ties them for 65th nationally in scoring defense. But to me, Oklahoma, here's what it comes down to: Seth Luttrell, Michael Hawkins, and company, they've got to find a way to be balanced. They have to find a way to balance this offense, whether it's Michael Hawkins running the ball, or Taylor Tatum running the ball, or Javante Barnes running the ball, or Gavin Sawchuk running the ball, or anybody else running the ball for that matter. They've got to find a way to run the football. They've got to find a way to find balance. And if you can't be balanced, then look, they're going to drop guys back in coverage, and they're going to cover receivers who can't get open in a zone. And they're just going to, force Oklahoma to go 3 yards, and then try to get a big play on third down. Oklahoma's got to find a way to be balanced. They've got to find a way to get those safeties to step forward, not backwards. They got to find a way to get those linebackers to bite on the play action. And you can't do any of that if you cannot run the ball. So I expect Oklahoma to come out and flash run early in this game. Now, one thing that Oklahoma has going for them, if you're looking for a glimmer of hope, is that the Texas game was only the second game of the season in which Oklahoma used the same offensive line as the week before, or I guess the two weeks before. So now you've got an offensive line that's played not great, but they've played together for 8 quarters. They've started this football game. The same group started, 2 games in a row. This will be their third game. So you're the guy who talks about cohesiveness along the offensive line. You got to think if it's going to happen, they're going into their third game now. This group, this 5, is going into their third game as a starting group. So that's got to bring something, right? That's got to, if there's going to be cohesiveness, if they're going to get to know each other and understand each other and trust each other and learn communication, you should start seeing that happen in the third game. Or am I just crazy on that?
No, you're 100% right. And I get that the scoreboard doesn't show it, but we saw that against Texas. Now, what we didn't see against Texas is the plays being made.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that Brent Venables has harped on in his pressers and his coaches show he does is the plays were there. We just didn't see them. And I'm not talking about we as fans, but I'm talking about Michael Hawkins. He just didn't see the open guys downfield. Running backs didn't see the right holes. And I feel like that's something we've been talking about past couple weeks since really the Tennessee game is the plays were there to be made. The execution wasn't there. And for me, that's what to move the ball, to be a well-balanced offense is those plays have to be made. When those holes do open up, you have to hit them. And going back to, the defense getting frustrated when the offense isn't doing well. Same thing for the offensive line. When the offensive line, who has not been good, when those holes are open, Hawkins has time and nothing happens. That line, who's banged up, has been good, they're getting into their heads and they're going to start shutting down as well. So this week has to be the week where Hawkins proves why it's him and not Jackson Arnold. And one thing I never thought I would see from Sooner fans is people calling for Jackson Arnold to be the starter again.
No, man, the backup guy is always going to be the guy.
And I said that, our first podcast is the backup quarterback's always the most popular guy on campus. When we had these Hawkins rumors, And my thing is, I get that, the arm talent might be a little bit better from Arnold to Hawkins. The experience is a little bit more from Arnold to Hawkins, but the turnovers, 2 games, 2 turnovers for Hawkins, not great.
Hmm.
But what did Arnold have? 5 or 6 in 3 games?
Yeah, he's got 3 interceptions on the season. Then he had the fumbles. The backwards pass counts as a fumble against Tennessee. So there's 5 right there. There's probably more than that. I'm just going off the top of my head. When you compare Hawkins to Arnold, look, completion percentage, Jackson Arnold's just under 60%, 59.8. Michael Hawkins is just under 63%, 62.7. But the average 5.3 yards per completion for Arnold to 6.8 for Hawkins. The long is 47 for Arnold, 60 for Hawkins. But the big discrepancy here is touchdowns. Jackson Arnold threw 7 touchdown passes. Michael Hawkins has thrown 1. But people, they want to talk about that. But the reality is Jackson Arnold got to play with Deion Burks, and Michael Hawkins has really yet to do that. Because Deion
And
Burks was injured before Hawkins came into that Tennessee game.
and also Jackson Arnold got to play Temple,
Right,
Houston,
right.
and Tulane. Hawkins has played Auburn and Texas. And I get Auburn not the greatest football team, but out of those 3 I mentioned, I would say Auburn beats at least 2 out of 3, if not 3 out of 3.
Right. Yeah. And the reality is that it's not we just talked about the schedule is not going to get easier for Michael Hawkins, but you've made that move. And we talked about it. You can't make the move back. You just can't. And I don't want to go down that road for a long time, but you divide the locker room, you divide the fan base, you divide the coaching staff. You can't go back. You're already, I saw talk about, Brent Venables was talking about maybe redshirting Jackson Arnold. That's great. I don't think Jackson Arnold's back on this team in 2025. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think he is at this point.
I, you
You've
know,
got to give Michael Hawkins more trust. You've got to put the ball in his hands and let him win or let him lose. Let him learn, because at this point you're building for 2025.
I do agree with you. I don't think that Arnold will be here next year, but I wouldn't mind if, you know, he sticks around with a new coordinator, with a quarterbacks coach, and tries to kind of show us who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But the trust in Hawkins has to increase, and this play calling to prevent turnovers has to stop. You have to let this kid have control of this offense, and you have to let this kid make his mistakes. Because if not, 1 or 2 things are going to happen. One, we're going to be in the same situation this time next year to where Hawkins hasn't gone through those growing pains and he hasn't really learned too much. Or 2, Hawkins gets frustrated and both Hawkins and Arnold hop in the portal.
I think I think losing Seth Luttrell is going to cost you Jackson Arnold one way or the other. I think with Michael Hawkins, it's going to be how you sell him on the whoever the new offensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach is. But the thing you've got going for Michael Hawkins is he's a legacy guy. And I think that's when your dad played for the university that you currently play for, and you're the starting quarterback. That's pretty good. It's that helps make that selling point. I'm not as concerned about Hawkins jumping in the portal as I am, and I'm really not concerned about Jackson Arnold because you can't keep them both. For Jackson Arnold, it's going to be a money issue because he's the highest paid player on this team, and they're not going to pay him that next year because they've given the reins to Michael Hawkins, and so Jackson Arnold's going to go somewhere else just based on money alone. He's going somewhere else. Give me let's go 2 guys we want to highlight on the offensive side of the ball, but let's do snake draft here. You go 1, I go 1, you go 2, you go 2. So give me your first guy.
I think my first guy I'm going to highlight is I'm blanking on his name. Sorry, Barnes.
Javonte Barnes.
I keep wanting to call him Robert Barnes, but I'm like, that's not correct.
Yep. That
Uh,
era has passed us in Sooner football.
we talked about it. The run game has to be a viable option this week, and he has been one of the better backs.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tatum has kind of had the more flashy plays and more touchdowns, but it's gonna have to be the bruiser backs while this offensive line is still getting their stuff figured out. And I think he's the one that I'm really going to circle today.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's one of the guys I would have mentioned. I'm going to go Taylor Tatum since you mentioned the guy I was going to go with. Now, to be fair, Taylor Tatum and Javonte Barnes both have 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. Here's the thing about Taylor Tatum, and I see a lot of social media talk about this kid, and I think the potential is great. Of the running backs, Sam Franklin's averaging 8.4 yards per carry, but he's only carried the ball 5 times. Of the running backs who get the bulk of the carries, Taylor Tatum's got 6.7 yards per carry to Javonte Barnes 3.3. But the difference and this is why you got to watch Taylor Tatum. It's not just about running the ball. It's about knowing where to run the ball, going the right direction on a play. And it's also about knowing your blocking assignments. And Taylor Tatum doesn't have either of those. The 3 aspects of the game, he's got the running part down. But getting lost in a play still happens. Blowing a blocking assignment still happens. So Taylor Tatum's my guy. And then you know what? I'm gonna stick with my tight end, man. I'm sticking with Bauer Sharp just because I don't know. I don't know if Deion Burks is playing or not. And then the same thing, I know Bauer Sharp is terrible at blocking, but he's number 2 on the team in receptions. And he's got to be a threat. 8.6 yards per catch. He's only got 1 receiving touchdown on the season, but he's got to be that guy. He's got to be a threat in the passing game and let blocking be blocking. Hopefully he gets better at it. But I mean, we're talking about the passing game not working. It's not because Bauer Sharp can't block. That's the reason why. That's not the reason why the passing game is not working. So get him involved in the passing game, and let's see if he can't be a weapon. And hopefully Deion Burks is there with him. Who's your second guy?
My second guy, I'm going with a young guy. I'm going with Zion Kearney,
Okay.
however you want to pronounce his last name. The flashes we saw from him Saturday night really impressed me.
Yeah.
And going to this banged up receiving room, I know he's kind of been banged up as well, but he looked to be the part. And
Mm-hmm.
and going back to the same way I talked about Jaquez Petaway, he was running those 2s with Hawkins. He's more familiar with Hawkins. And so I expect if he could get 45 yards and get open against this Texas defense, I feel like he should be able to do some stuff against this South Carolina defense.
I agree. And that's why, and going back to what I said, the best thing Oklahoma has going for them on Saturday is that South Carolina is not Texas. Let's flip the sides of the ball and talk defense. We talked earlier in the podcast about, can the defense stay locked in? And what we said about Oklahoma's offense against the South Carolina defense really applies for Oklahoma's defense against the South Carolina offense, in as much as they're not Texas. South Carolina's not Texas. Now, the Gamecocks are really good at running the football. They're 55th in the country in rushing yards per game at 175.3, but they're 105th in passing. And so this is a one-dimensional team, and one-dimensional teams are much easier to defend, especially if you can be dominant up front, which Oklahoma has shown the propensity to do. Not saying you can fall asleep in the secondary, not saying that you can sleep on the tight ends when, they kind of chip and then go out for a pass. You got to be alert and be ready for those things. But the reality is, this should be a much easier game plan for Oklahoma's defense than what they faced a week ago against Texas. They may not face another offense this season that's capable of doing what Texas was capable of doing. And so you do kind of expect at least I do, to see a big bounce back for Oklahoma where they're back to making plays behind the line of scrimmage. They're back to putting pressure on the quarterback. They're back to forcing turnovers. They're back to being that type of defense that we've seen and known them to be through 4 of the 6 games this season.
Yeah, and this is the game where the Oklahoma defense needs to show that they're still elite because I know the offense didn't look good Saturday, but the defense, they showed just how I I don't want to say it, but I'm gonna say it, but how mentally weak they were. I mean, you go to the fumble that was recovered for a touchdown. There's no way that you should not have been able to jump on that ball.
Mm-hmm.
And it was players that gave up on the play, and after that, the defense just kind of fell apart. They just were never the same. And I get that they played a lot of snaps this season. They're going to have to continue to play a lot of snaps throughout the rest of the season, but they have to show that they're mentally strong enough that when their offense is stagnant, that they can bow up and get the ball back. And that they're not going to make these mental mistakes. They're not going to miss these tackles because that second half defense, it looked a lot like the Lincoln Riley era defense. Guys were missing tackles. We were a lot of arm tackles, and it just looked bad. It did not look like the defense we have seen the other
Right.
4 games this season.
Yeah. This is where I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. The second quarter was bad with Oklahoma on Saturday against Texas, where Texas gets 21 points. But the first quarter, Oklahoma's defense very much looked dominant. Second quarter, you had the bad breaks and so forth. Third quarter, fourth quarter, they looked okay. They didn't look great. They didn't. I agree with you. They didn't look like what we've seen through the first 5 games of the season, but they didn't look, in my opinion, as bad as what that final score indicates. The second quarter is where this game was lost. But I think what you're saying and what I agree with is this defense, they went out and they punched Texas in the mouth. I mean, they were there. They were ready to fight. Billy Bowman gets that interception on the opening drive for the Longhorns. Go back and watch that. Watch him jawing at Quinn Ewers as he's running by with the ball. They were ready. They were there. They were ready to go. And then the offense, it's like they're saying to themselves, how many times can we keep giving gifts to the offense and they waste them? Because that interception for Billy Bowman resulted in 0 points. But you go back out there and you force another punt. You force another punt. And so the defense is there going toe-to-toe with what I believe is one of the top offenses in the country. And they're getting no help. They're getting no support. And that's why I said at the top of this podcast, Oklahoma's got to make something happen in the first quarter of this game. They've got to put points on the board in the first quarter of this game. And then I think if they do, they're in business. I think they're ready to roll. But if they don't, you're right. You could see this thing begin to teeter for one of these two teams. One of these two teams is going to teeter out of control, I believe, confidence-wise. You just got to think with Oklahoma having the home field advantage, Oklahoma having the more dominant defense, that team that's going to teeter out of control is going to be South Carolina. But stopping the run, Oklahoma stopping South Carolina's rushing attack, that's where it's going to be. That's going to be the bread and butter of what this defense gets to do on Saturday. You keep South Carolina behind the chains, you're in store for a good defensive day. South Carolina wins first down, gets second and medium, third and short. It could be a frustrating day for Oklahoma's defense.
100%. And, that kind of goes to that front line. Oklahoma's its defensive line looked really good throughout that game. I know we only had a couple sacks, maybe I think just 2 sacks, was it? Trying to pull up a quick.
No, he had one. Only one
just one
sack. Yeah.
Uh, it the defensive line looked dominant. I mean,
Mhm.
Jaden Jackson, again, I know I've talked about him a lot. True freshman to do what he was doing against this. I mean, Texas might have the best offensive line in the country. They have a pretty solid offensive line. Our defensive line did not bow down, did not back down. Where we saw the kind of disconnect, in my opinion, was at that second level.
Mhm.
Kip Lewis, Lewis Carter, Kobe McKenzie, Danny Sussman, they all had quite a few missed tackles. I mean, even Billy Bowen had a missed tackle. I Go ahead.
Well, I was saying those are the guys that have to produce on Saturday. Those are the guys that when you look at stopping the South Carolina offense, to me, those are the most vital. That second level on Saturday, it's going to be the most vital unit on the field.
No doubt. And our defensive line did exactly what they were supposed to do against Texas, and I expect them to do exactly what they're supposed to
Mhm.
do against South Carolina. It was really great to see Deshaun McCullough out there. I know he played very limited snaps, but I feel like he produced. And this is going to be a game where he's second week fully healthy. I think this is the first week he's fully healthy, and I don't think he's going to be on that snap count like he was last week. So this is going to be a game where he can like, welcome back. You know,
Mhm.
showing Sooner Nation that he's still here and he's still that highly touted, highly scouted kid from the transfer portal. We were really high on him coming in last season. He made big plays last season, ended up getting hurt, finally back. He's one of the guys that he's not gonna be one of my players to highlight, but he's definitely one of my players I'm gonna keep my eye on.
Well, let's talk about the players we're going to highlight. We're going to do the same thing we do with offense. Two guys on the defensive side of the ball. Same format. Give me your first guy.
I'll let you go first since I went first on the offense.
Well, I think this is a big day for Danny Stutzman because Oklahoma's their focus is going to be to stop the run. And so I look at Danny Stutzman. He's the leader not only of the linebacking core, but he's the leader of the defense. But he still leads the team in tackles with 46 on the season. But he's going to need to be everywhere on Saturday. So that's my first guy. And it's kind of a Captain Obvious type pick, but I'm going with Danny Stutzman.
You know, I'm gonna go with a kid that I've highlighted a lot, Eli Bowen.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thoroughly impressed with him, and we've seen his snap count go up every week. And I mean, did you realize that he led the Sooners in tackles
I
Saturday?
I know I kept waiting for you to bring that up in our post game podcast.
Um, I mean, this kid is special. I know his brother gets a lot of the attention, but I mean, this this secondary with the Bowman brothers, I mean, Eli kind of stole the show Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
He had 8 tackles, 5 solo, 1 tackle for loss, and he was doing what a lot of other secondary players weren't. He was wrapping up, and he looked really, really good.
Give me your second guy.
My second guy, I'm trying to pick which one I want to go with. I think I'm gonna highlight uh I think I'm gonna go with Jaden Jackson, another one of those true freshman young
Mm-hmm.
kids. Um, it was either for me, it was either him or Dominic Williams. But I just love the intensity that Jaden Jackson has been playing at. This is a kid that came in, he was a 3-star recruit. I thought, this guy could be an impact player right away. He has that body type, he had that strength, and, first true freshman to start since who was it? Uh,
Tommy Harris.
Earl Tommy Harris. And, he's played the part. He had 5 tackles against Texas. And, I'd expect him to kind of continue that momentum, carry that momentum into this week against South Carolina.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Dominic Williams is another good pick. I'm going to go with Robert Spears Jennings in the secondary. And here's the reason why, because the secondary has to be solid. They've got to be ready for the pass when it comes. And so if you shut them down on first down, shut them down on second down, then you give up a third and long, it doesn't matter what you did first and second down. But also, you know, Robert Spears Jennings is a turnover monster. I mean, the guy's got an interception. He's got 3 forced fumbles on the season. He can make things happen. You know, he's second on the team in total tackles at 40, but he can also make other things happen and get Oklahoma the ball. And we've already talked about how turnovers could be key to this game. And so I'm going to go with Robert Spears Jennings as my second guy to watch on Oklahoma's defense on Saturday. We've still got one segment left of the Sooner Nation podcast. We're going to close it out with kind of going over the over-under. Kib's going to ask the questions. We're going to give you the SEC rundown, and then we've got our score predictions for the Sooners and the Gamecocks on Saturday. Hang out with us. All right, Caleb, this is your segment, over-under. You get to ask the questions, throw out a number. I'll tell you whether it'll be over or under for the Sooners on Saturday or the Gamecocks, either one. So take it away, my man.
So the first one I'm going to go with is how many total yards of offense is Oklahoma going to have on Saturday? We're averaging about 285 per game right now, which is absolutely crazy to me. But what's it going to be? Is Oklahoma going to go over or under 285 yards?
Man, has Oklahoma produced a 300-yard game yet this season?
I don't. Maybe Temple. Let me.
I'm going to say under. I'm going to say under because to go over, you basically have to get to 300. And I want them. You'll see my score prediction here in a little bit. I'm expecting Oklahoma to score, but I'm also expecting some defense, special teams, and short field type situations. I'm going to go under. I'm sorry. I mean, we're 6 games into the season. They're under that more than they're over that. So I'm going to go under 285.
So we have had multiple 300-yard games, including Temple, Tulane, and I think that's it. I'm still checking.
Okay. That's
so
gonna
be about it.
Basically non-conference,
Yes.
two of the 3 non-conference games.
But I think I completely agree with you. I don't think. I mean, unless we see just an entirely different chapter of this offense, I don't think we're hitting 285.
Yeah, I agree.
So sticking with the offense over-unders, 2.5 touchdowns from the offense.
2.5 touchdowns from the offense. I'm going to go with the over on that. Again, I'm not giving away my score prediction just yet, but I think the offense will score more than 3 touchdowns on Saturday.
All right. Going to go to the defensive side of the ball. I had the sacks at 2.5.
Watch them kick like 10 field goals just to mess with me on Saturday. Anyway, sorry. Sacks 2.5. What?
2.5 sacks.
Definitely taking over on that as well. But I expect Oklahoma to be able to shut down South Carolina first and second down. I think maybe not consistently throughout the game, but there will be obvious passing downs for South Carolina. And I think that lends to the Sooners being able to kind of pin their ears back, so to speak, and come after the quarterback.
Okay. Sticking with the kind of the defense side of the ball, I'm going to go to South Carolina. How many total yards of offense are they going to have? They're averaging about 350 per game. So it's going to be over or under 350.
I'm going to say over.
Say over?
Yeah, I know that doesn't sound very good for what I'm going to pick Oklahoma to win this game. But I think Oklahoma is going to win off of turnovers. And so I think South Carolina will have offensive success. But I think they go over 350 in total yards.
And I've gone back and forth with that one. Kind of what do I think? And I don't think that they're going to go over that.
I want you to
I
be right. I
I
totally want you to be right here.
I do too because I feel like if I'm wrong and they do hit that over, I don't like Oklahoma's chances at winning this football
Right.
game.
Right.
Um, but it's I don't know. I don't know if they can do that. The last one I got for you, this one's kind of a little bit more on the fun side. Do you want to take a guess at how many yards per game Luke Elzinga is punting?
Like you talking about averages?
Yeah, what he averages a game right now.
46.7.
Not his average punt, like his total yards, sorry.
Like total. Man, I don't know. I know it's probably going to be like close to total yards of offense for Oklahoma, if not more. So I'm going to say he's going for 250 yards.
You're very close. He's averaging 240 yards per game
Wow.
punting the ball. So is Luke Elzinga going to go over or under 240 punt yards?
I'm going to pick the under there because I think they're going to have more offensive success than they did against Tennessee, more offensive success than they did against Auburn, and certainly more offensive success than they had against Texas. So I'm going to take the under on that one.
All right. Fun fact, his second highest punt punt total was against Houston at 352.
Which is
Uh,
ridiculous. They should have never had to
yes,
punt that many times against Houston.
I agree. And I'm sorry, what did you say what you guessed his average yards per punt was?
I don't even remember. I said like 47, something like that.
He's averaging 46.1.
That's
So you
pretty
were really
close.
close.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
That's all the over unders I got for you.
All
Um,
right, man. Well, good job with that. Those are always fun. And as the listener on the podcast, you can always hit us up on Twitter at Sports Heartland. You can find us on the internet, heartland-sports.com. Tell us if you think we're crazy with the way we answer these questions, or if you agree, or, we want to hear from you. So thanks for those of you that dropped comments on for the last podcast where Caleb and I basically argued for an hour. Looking at the SEC rundown this weekend, of course, we got South Carolina and Oklahoma, but there's a couple other interesting games here. Alabama, Tennessee, both of these schools sitting at 2-1 in conference play. Alabama having, the loss to Vanderbilt and then struggling last week against South Carolina. Now they go on the road to Knoxville to play Tennessee. That's not going to be an easy game for the Gamecocks. For the Crimson Tide. It's not going to be an easy game for the Gamecocks either. Crimson Tide on Saturday, 2:30 kickoff, and from Knoxville. I almost said Tallahassee, like that's even relevant to this conversation.
I mean, it is. We're talking about Alabama.
Are you surprised to see? Well, Tallahassee's Florida, buddy. Um, are you surprised to see Alabama as a 3-point favorite?
No, I think Alabama's going to be favored in just about every game left on their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of surprised that it's only at 3. Um, but this is a big game for both programs. You know, Alabama's looked kind of shaky the past couple of weeks. So has Tennessee. Same week that Alabama lost to Vandy, Tennessee lost to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Then Tennessee overtime win against Florida, and Alabama was a slightly better pass away from going to overtime with South Carolina. Not South Carolina, yeah, South Carolina. So both teams have kind of been a little bit shaky. And the one thing, Joe Klatt said it the best, this Alabama team is like a 2018 Oklahoma. They
Mm-hmm.
have a fantastic offense, but their defense is what's really missing.
Which is
And
crazy for an Alabama team.
absolutely, but when you go into a school like Tennessee, you know, Tennessee has a great offense. I mean, they haven't really been put up the numbers like they were in non-conference. Uh, the highest amount of points they've scored in conference You want to guess who that was against?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma at
Yeah,
25. They had 25, 14, and 23. So their offense is kind of teetered, but I don't expect Alabama's defense to be able to do
right.
what these other schools have been able to do. And so that's going to be a very, very interesting game to watch.
Yeah, speaking of interesting, not a game that you would really sit down and watch all of it, but it's kind of interesting to see Vanderbilt as a 26-point favorite over Ball State, and the Commodores can be 5-2 after Saturday. Just throwing that out from the interesting note. LSU at Arkansas Saturday evening is going to be fun. The big game clearly in the SEC this weekend is Georgia at Texas. Longhorns are a 5-point favorite right now over the Bulldogs. That's going to be a fun game, I think.
Yeah, and I think with that game being in Austin kind of helps Texas out a little bit.
Yeah, but that
And
hangover is a real deal. That
um,
hangover is a real thing.
I mean, we saw that a couple weeks ago with Alabama,
Right.
and really, I know you can't do this, but you take away that first quarter against Alabama, Georgia's sitting at 6-0 right now.
Yeah.
And again, I know you can't do that, but Georgia has a lot to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas is kind of filling cloud nine right now. And unlike Oklahoma, this Georgia team has they like Oklahoma, they have a good defense, but unlike Oklahoma, they have a good offense as well.
Right.
And I know Carson Beck is not going to go out and win the Heisman or really do much for college football fans, but he's good enough. This Georgia offense is good enough to win games because of how good this Georgia defense is. And
Well, that
another game,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to move us on to Oklahoma and South Carolina. So go ahead with what you're going to say.
Another game that kind of piques my interest a little bit is Auburn, Missouri. Auburn sitting at 2-4,
Yeah.
Missouri sitting at 5-1, but I think kind of what Oklahoma did to Tennessee kind of spread out that blueprint of how to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
A&M did that to
That's a
Missouri.
great point. Just run the ball down their throat. Yep.
And what's one thing that Auburn's really good at is
Exactly.
running the football.
Yep.
Missouri's 4.5-point favorite at home against the 2-4 Auburn team. This Auburn team's kind of trying to fight for life. I think this could be another crazy upset win in the SEC.
No, that's a solid analysis, and I agree with you. Just run the ball in Missouri, and I think Auburn has the ability to do just that. Of course, it is crazy. Auburn sitting at 0-3 in conference play, 2-4 overall. Missouri 1-1 in conference play, 5-1 overall. This is the time of year where things change for teams. Their seasons change in October, and it could be a one of those moments that changes it for Auburn and Missouri. Based off of how that game goes, because the last time we saw the Missouri Tigers in conference play, they were getting routed by A&M. That's a great thought, Caleb. Oklahoma at South Carolina on Saturday, 11:45 kickoff on the SEC network. The Sooners opened up as a 1.5-point favorite, currently sitting at 3.5. The over-under is 41.5 on this game. According to the ESPN matchup predictors, Sooners have a 65.7% chance of winning. That means just 34.3% for South Carolina. Caleb, I'm going to go first because I think I let you go first last time. I've got Oklahoma winning this game by a final score of 31-24. And as I alluded to earlier, I think special teams play a factor on Saturday, as well as the defense giving the offense good field position. But I've got Oklahoma, just for the record here, I got Oklahoma with 4 touchdowns and a field goal. So that puts me on the over with what you said earlier on the over-under question. So I didn't want to give that away in that moment, but 31-24 is my score prediction. And I know the first thing you're going to say is, what, you think this offense is going to score 31 points? Yes, sir. Yes, I do. I think the team is going to score 31 points. It could be very well that 7 of those come from the defense.
I have 24-14 Oklahoma. I don't have too much faith in this offense, but I feel like this is gonna be, I don't know why, but I just feel like this is gonna be the week that we get a special teams touchdown. And I don't know if that's gonna come from honestly, I think it's gonna come from a fake field goal or fake punt.
Hmm.
But I feel like this is the week that we get a special teams touchdown, and that's why I kind of have it at that 24. But I have us winning by 10. I do not have the over. I don't think I would ever pick it over for an Oklahoma game the rest of the year.
Hmm.
Um, but I do have us winning, but I just don't think this offense is going to put up 31 points like you do. I think 17 is probably about the ceiling for this offense right now. And then, of course, special teams touchdown, whenever that may be. But that's my 24-14.
I like that we're both picking defense or special teams touchdowns in this game. I kind of dig that. So yeah, so that's going to be it. We'll be back on Sunday. We'll tell you our the pros and cons, the goods, the bad, the ugly, the whatever happens on Saturday. We'll talk about it. Until then, we want you guys to enjoy your weekend, enjoy your college football, and Boomer Sooner.
I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you. And the money